Now I would like to introduce Mr. Pritesh Singh, who is from NRI Consulting and Solutions India Private Limited. He has been conducting strategy and operational consulting assignments for global automotive OEMs, suppliers, RD organizations, and government. He specializes in CASE and has dedicated 10 plus years of studying different themes related to electric vehicles for Indian and global markets. He has been working around EV policy, EV roadmap, engineering and R&D, supply chain, battery value chain, and battery reuse and recycling. Please welcome Mr. Pritesh Singh with a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Ms. Millie Dubey, Director, PHDCCI, Dr. Ranjeet Mehta, Executive Director, PHDCCI, Mr. Sudhendu Sinha, Advisor, NITI Aayog, Shri Bhaskar, Regional Energy Team Leader, US Embassy, Mr. Yash Sachar, Vice President and Head, Corporate Affairs, Ashok, Leyland. First of all, I would like to congratulate PhD Chamber of Commerce for organizing this event with who is who of electric mobility industry in India. NRI, in collaboration with PhD Chamber of Commerce, has prepared a knowledge report, which we are calling as EV Ecosystem in India, Roadmap for the Future. And in next 20 minutes, I will be talking about status of electric mobility in India, the growth path which we have seen till now, whether electrification is going to solve the national challenges, the national objectives or not, some of the insights around local supply chain, mainly focusing on the batteries, motors, and inverter. And then in the end, we have also prepared some set of recommendations which can be considered by government and also from the industry players. Rather than talking about specific chapters, what I have thought today is I'm going to talk about some of the questions which we have been seeing like since last 10, 11 years when I also started my journey in studying the consulting projects around the electrification or all kind of alternate powertrains. So first question is EV really the option which is going to be the common powertrain or which has the potential? Till now, I think the debate was around the powertrain. The powertrain which is going to win has to solve national objectives of energy security, manufacturing import dependence, and the carbon emissions. But I believe that the debate is over. And now there is no question of whether electrification is going to happen or not, whether it is going to solve the challenges around the fuel or different powertrains which India has. It is very well known that now the electrification has identified its kind of space and going to solve at least some part of it, some part of the national objectives. Moving on, if you look at the growth path around different sectors, including two-wheelers, three-wheelers, passenger cars, and the commercial vehicle. In commercial vehicle, I mostly talk about the buses. In two-wheeler segment, it's around more than 100% growth rate in last 3 calendar year, if you look at. One very interesting point is that which also probably gives a positive outlook of the segment is that consolidation has already started happening in industry. And if you look at the number in the category of others has gone significantly down, and now it's only 28% of the companies which are into the other segment, which means there is an entry of traditional as well as the startups which are focusing on the quality products. Given the kind of incentive scheme which we have, even if we continue for some period of time, is going to give further positive direction of the two-wheeler industry. The consolidation has not happened in the three-wheeler industry because mostly it's still dominated by the e-rickshaw, and L5 segment with the traditional players is now coming up, so it is going to take a little bit of time when you will see the consolidation. But one problem needs to be solved is the quality of product, especially around the three-wheeler segment. Passenger vehicle story in India is a very, very different story, even if you compare it with the globally how the electrification is happening. In India, it's not only Indian companies like Tata and Mahindra, but now you will see the global organizations also coming up, and it's definitely This year is going to be a very, very significant year in passenger car industry because CAFE penalties are going to be definitely imposed. And once these penalties are there, even if it's going to take a profitability hit on the companies, they don't have any other option than at least introducing the vehicles. In the buses segment, a very positive story. Mr. Yashpal sir, I think, is going to talk a lot about it. But yes, there are larger organizations like Tata, Ashok, Leyland, PMI, and JBM Auto doing quite good work around this. Let me briefly talk about India's policy intentions. Like the question is always that we have Sinha sir, I think he'll going to give a very much better perspective than me, but I'll definitely try to talk about why India has not been focusing on putting up a long-term policy. So if you look at the investors or the outside investors, they always try to see, that the country should have a policy which lasts for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But, in a segment where when things are not very, sure how it is going to transform in future, it's better to move slowly. At least the commitment is in terms of money, in terms of the investments from the government, but we need to be flexible in terms of changing the terms and conditions of the policy. In my opinion, or in our opinion, government has been very, very, strategic in terms of putting up the policies with the two objectives in mind. One is market creation, definitely, and the second is the localization of the local value add. So there are three strategic policies with 4 pillars which India has implemented. FAME, Phase Manufacturing Program, PLI for ACC, and PLI for auto components. Market creation problem is being tackled by FAME, which also ensures the assembly level of localization in India, but assembly level of localization is not enough. So India has gone beyond localizing, beyond targeting the assembly level of localization and tapping on the critical components like batteries to localize, supported by auto component PLI as well. If you look at the performance of the companies, performance of the policy, it has been extending because utilization was lower. So by now it's 11,500 CR, 1,500 crore has been just allocated. So out of this, in our estimations, around 75% is going to be utilized by end of March 2024, and remaining 20% we are still going to remain. Now it has to be seen how that budget is being, that remaining budget can be utilized. What we have seen previously that it is passed to the from FAME 1 to FAME 2, and if FAME 3 becomes the reality, this budget can be utilized there also, or maybe some special funding can be done to any specific kind of vehicle or R&D or the charging infrastructure. Why continuation of policy is important? So when we see the 10% penetration in two-wheeler, people start talking about, the two-wheeler industry has already grown and probably it can self-sustain. But in our opinion, policy we need to have the policy continue at least 3 to 5 years. In some form of the changes can happen, because if you look at the impact of the policy, you will find the moment the subsidies were reduced from 15,000 per kilowatt hour to 10,000 per kilowatt hour, there was a very, very negative impact on the industry. Obviously, it has grown later with the reduced incentives also, which again indicates a very positive outlook that they can self-sustain, but they definitely need a lot of support for another few years. Here, this mostly talks about, on right-hand side of this slide, you will see the speculative, scheme of the FAME 3, depending on the news which is available in the public domain. One very interesting point here, you can see that the introduction of LCVs or the commercial vehicle also in the FAME 3 being talked about, a more focus on the charging infrastructure plus some budget allocated in the R&D. This I talked mostly about the positives in the two-wheeler, three-wheeler, passenger car and commercial vehicle industry, but it's not all very rosy story, so let me talk about the challenges also. And challenges are immense, starting from the raw material to component manufacturing to financing to charging infrastructure, skill development, recycling and reuse. I'll talk about few of them today. So let me start with the most important challenge, which is in terms of the development of supply chain and with the focus of long-term attention. On this chart, which is the result of a detailed study which we conducted, talks about the real level of localization or the actual localization, not the assembly level of localization. Despite a lot of efforts under FAME, Phased Manufacturing Program, as well as PLI, which is definitely coming, the level of localization is still very, very low. So if you look at the component industry, traditionally how it has operated in India, it focuses mostly bringing the technology from outside, utilizing our own strengths which we have in India, and then doing the business. But that's not really going to work in electrification. Nobody outside is ready to give the technology. A battery cell manufacturer is not ready to give the technology. So the money power is not going to work here. So if you look at the critical components like batteries, the motors, inverters, e-axle utilization, the real level of localization, which we have calculated based on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 level of localization is very, very low, less than even 5% for many of the components. So that's a really very, very big challenge. Now I'll talk about the possibility of localization in India. NITI Aayog suggests that theoretically 69 to 90% can be localized in India for LFP chemistry. That is much lower in terms of the NMC chemistry, which is around the 40%. So as you know, the China has already built the capability around the metal production, and wherever they don't have the production, they have built the capability in processing. With the lower level of availability of critical raw materials and resources, it's going to definitely pose a challenge for India. But the positive story is that we are, kind of proactive and trying to invest and have G2G collaborations with outside countries. And a very good news about lithium deposits also gives some very good hope about localizing the raw materials, but the lithium reserves are going to take time, even if they becomes the reality, minimum 5 to 6 years. Briefly talking about our estimates, if you look at the left-hand side, you will find out that the India definitely is going to require more than 200 gigawatt hour of batteries by 2030, which means the lithium demand in terms of kilowatt, if you calculate, only for the lithium, it's going to be around 16.1 kilowatt by 2030. Moving on the cathode materials part, if you look at with LFP being a major battery chemistry, and also the advanced NMC chemistry being implemented and adopted by different automakers, you'll find the demand for nickel as well as for cobalt rising around 15 to 16 kiloton and 7 kiloton respectively by 2030. Similar trends we have observed, especially observed in the anode material also. So if you look at the graphite requirement is going to be around 50 kiloton by 2030. So these are the very big challenges. But in order to address these challenges, we have companies which are working very actively across the value chain, starting from cell manufacturing to pack assembly to OEMs to recyclers, even in the material supply as well. So on the left-hand side, you will see the globally, India doesn't, you can't find India globally being one of the player in the battery manufacturing in current situation. But if you look at the right side, which is indicative list of companies which are working around battery manufacturing, including PLI awarded companies, it foresees, or it basically tries to capture a very large part of the battery industry as well. But what is most important, until or unless the anode, cathode, electrolyte, and separator manufacturing becomes a reality in India, the 60% of the value add is definitely going to be a challenge. And until or unless we have that 60% value add, we really cannot solve the national challenges which I mentioned in the beginning in terms of manufacturing, import dependence, carbon emissions, and energy security. So let me talk about the status of these, the anode manufacturing, cathode manufacturing, and electrolyte and separator manufacturing in India very briefly. Let me have a look on the anode manufacturing in India. So probably anode is one of the easier options than these 4 critical components which can be manufactured in India. And there are organizations, I think, very well known to all of us, that Epsilon, HEG, and Himadri is very active and have the capability to supply nodes. Now, what is the strategy? So in India, the scale is a challenge. So they are not getting the scale with one company or a set of companies. So what they are trying to do is, or that is the strategy in component business which companies are following, is going outside, building the capability, capacity, and proving themselves with the global automakers. And once there is a volume in India, they are ready to supply. So similar is the problem of challenges around the cathode manufacturing. So any cathode manufacturer, some names I have mentioned here, any cathode manufacturer will look for two things. One is the proximity to the resources, or a definite commitment in terms of the numbers or the volume, what a country has to offer. Then that is how they are going to choose the location. I think India is not very well positioned in both of these. So we don't have the proximity to the resources, as well as government has not committed on any particular number. Obviously, there are suggestions 30% to 70% of the penetration or the conversion to pure electric vehicle, but there is no definite number or the target which has been announced. So in the absence of proximity of the resources, as well as the total commitment in terms of numbers, cathode manufacturers might choose some other locations like Indonesia, etc., with whose India also has the FTA, so they can leverage that and try to tap Indian market. Now, in terms of the electrolyte manufacturing in India, if I talk about the availability of raw material, which starts with salt, solvent, and additives, other than salt, we have definitely challenges around solvent and additives, but there are companies across the value chain of electrolyte manufacturing active. I'll talk now about the separator manufacturing. So again, there are companies which are working in this domain, but the challenges which we are facing again around these are long-term demand contract, raw material supply, cell chemistry, and there are processes which also poses some of the challenges. But yes, some of the companies are working on this, some of them are well-funded, so let's see if we can bring the technology and make this reality sooner. In 2013, I used to discuss a lot with CPCB and NITI Aayog, and then that time we identified, even in the battery management rules, lithium-ion battery is not part of it. So we never really thought about India taking a lead in terms of the recycling, lithium-ion battery recycling, but we have made a lot of progress. Now there is a policy which is well placed. Some of the organizations have kind of progressed very well. At least they are dealing with the black mass and developing the processes through which they can do the recycling. You can see the number of companies very active in this. I will take few names. For example, Executive Recycling. In the second panel discussion, the representatives are also coming from there, so you can listen their views. Are either have the capability or building the capability of metal extraction. So these are the companies starting from Exego, Atero. They can do the metal extraction, and in a very good way, that too very robust processes. There are other companies which are dealing with the black mass, but they also aspire to become the metal extraction companies very soon. Till now, what all I talked about was mostly about the market creation part of it, but the infrastructure is kind of playing now, at least at the stage at which we are, is playing a very, very critical role. So I'll talk about a little bit of it. 11,000 to 12,000 public charging stations are there. You can see in them spread across different states. One very important observation, we have done a very detailed analysis, and in this you will see the number of chargers in these two timelines, if you see, are increasing much faster for the lower form factor vehicles. And the CCS2 was like 20%, and then it has increased to 28%. And CHAdeMO probably is going to go down because the vehicles are not there. At the same time, challenges are there, right? The vehicle to charger ratio is not good in India. It has to catch up very fast, become 1:10 or 1:6. In the next panel discussion, we have Avdeshji. Probably we can hear a lot of good insights around these topics. And but in terms of the opportunity, in terms of the business opportunities, it is the ecosystem which we have listed down here. In all across the ecosystem, there are opportunities for different players in India. I'll close this with some of the suggestions around different policies, which basically is not applicable only for India or only for the government, but also for the private organizations. So in terms of the FAME, we suggest that it has to be continued at least for 3 to 5 years with a definite target of some level of conversion. We have to be, make a provision in which we can do the regular updates, and ensuring timely disbursement of incentives is also very important, for which private players have faced a lot of challenges. Effectiveness of PLI, here our recommendation is that PLI has to be implemented for the upstream players also, for the CAM material or the pre-CAM material providers, not only for the battery manufacturers. So government can think of putting up a PLI scheme for the raw material suppliers. Then around charging infrastructure, more push definitely is required in terms of the number of charging stations, number of charges, not only OMCs, but it has to be given to other charging infra players. Standardized protocols and interoperability, probably it is going to take a lot of time, but we should definitely work in this direction. One very important last point I want to mention is about, when EV started, when FAME 1 was implemented, one target was to create mass, popularity or mass awareness of these. In charging infrastructure, now consumer has to be made aware how to utilize this, what are the choice and challenges, so that also can be put as part of the scheme. And then around EV and R&D investments, definitely around across the value chain of the vehicle, we need to push for the R&D. I think in the next famous scheme, we can expect to see some of those things. So thank you very much. This is all what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pritesh, for giving an overview of the knowledge report. Now I would request all the dignitaries present on the stage to please release the knowledge report. A round of applause. Thank you.